We are back. And when I say we're back, I mean we're so back because the whole gang's back together. Sela, Greg, Jonah. It's Zag Talk. And of course, later we've got our guest Seth Cohen, co founder of Sweetfin, talking about what it's like working with the voracious appetite of delivery aggregators. But hey, gang.
Hi.
Good to be back. New year, new season, new pod. Let's go.
And everyone's cold because it's we're in the middle of the Arctic blast that seems to be freezing the country or perhaps the world. But yeah, I don't know. How you been, Greg? How you been, Sela? Catch me up.
Well, I had a lovely time in the desert back in December for Commotion Global. It was
Yeah.
was very inspiring to see hundreds of mayors from across sub-Saharan Africa and other locales that I just simply had never really had a chance to interact with, given how hard it is to get a visa into the United States, let alone these days. And yeah, meeting Mate Rimac, who was a really nice guy, of course, Mate Rimac, I should say, with the Croatian there of Rimac Industry, with his Bugatti supercars on one end and his robotaxis on the other.
You love a good supercar, Greg.
I do. To me, the funniest part of that was the notion of, is after we spend a whole lot of time talking about why we build these vehicles that have 4 seats and are thousands of pounds, then Mate shows off a 2-seater robotaxi concept, and the first thing that comes to mind is 2 seats. No one wants a car with 2 seats. They need more seats. What if I have 4 people? And that whole mobility brain just kicked right back in there. So that's how I've been here, purging that out of my consciousness.
What have you been purging from your conscious, Sela?
Nothing that compares. I've just been everything. Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to Commotion, but everything's just been good. Christmas, New Year. I went to Iraq, so not too far, Greg, from you for the Christmas holidays, which was good. The transport was quite manic. There's no public transport there. It's more like crossing a street where cars are driving at 120 kilometers an hour. But that was good. But yeah, good. And how about you, Jonah?
Well, I was in Taiwan, so saw lots of bicycles, saw lots of multimodality. Great country, fun to visit, and yeah, it's sort of a transit paradise, I would say. So
I was going to say, Taipei, I think, was the first place that I experienced in 2009, like total Wi-Fi coverage in the trains. And I remember seeing people text with thumbs at speeds I don't think I could type with both hands there. Like, I really knew I was in the future there where I was visiting Taipei at the time.
Yeah, the future is full of carpal tunnel, that's for sure.
There you go.
But we should just dive into the stories. I don't want to bore listeners too much because while we've been gone, someone or something has been very busy misbehaving. So the AVs, they're having a fun time these last couple of weeks. So the one that I think kind of kicked off this current spate of stories was there was a power outage in San Francisco. Tut PG&E, but the Waymos, they freaked out. They just sort of stopped dead in their tracks, and I think the kind of sleuthing was that they would encounter an intersection that was non-signalized, weren't sure what to do, and they would sort of call for remote operator help, and then there was basically overloading the system because it works when 1, 2, 3 Waymos need help, but not when 300 of them do, right?
Yes, that was my take exactly. And, I think, it's very funny to me. Like, I got a viral LinkedIn post out of that whole thing there where I tweeted about this, posted about it. Well, to me, it was interesting because back in 2017, Ford actually brought me in, their subcontractors brought me in to write their submission to NHTSA on like AV safety. And so like they put all the engineering teams in a room, cycled them through with me, and I had to like turn it into English. So seeing the Waymos, I'm like, oh, I get it. Like they've exceeded their ODD. Like this is the fail safe. And so, yeah, to your exact point, from a single engineering standpoint, they protected the vehicle occupants. It failed safely there. But, and this is where I do think they deserve blame, you have had time to model this out at the scale of hundreds of AVs. Like, there's no reason to not think about
PG&E
this
is going to mess this up eventually.
Yeah, like you can't just be like, well, we did our job here. We saved the one vehicle and the occupants, and it's not our job to think about this at larger scale. But it was interesting. A lot of people blamed the city, blamed PG&E. A lot of people were standing for Waymo. I do think there was, obviously lots of people at fault here, and lots of human drivers were probably doing deeply unsafe things driving around in the middle of that blackout with no signals as well. But still, Waymo, you had time to think this through. Like, show us how you're modeling out these complex behaviors. And NHTSA should probably make that a requirement too. Like, show us what it's like when you are above a certain vehicle threshold, what your plans are for fail-safe. But that's just me.
Yeah. I'd say it sort of feels like there's a little bit of a like a messaging PR issue here where it's like Waymo's we're the good one, and now they're sort of struggling to control the narrative. And same with this next one where, in Austin, they've been getting in trouble because the Waymos will not stop when a school bus has its crossing arm out, which is like, that's traffic safety rule number 1. A Waymo did issue a recall, which was supposed to fix it, but it didn't fix it. And now the NTSB is investigating. So it's just like, I don't know, that one feels like if the car can't stop when there's a red stop sign in front of it, that one's troubling.
That's just sort of, yeah. Well, I don't understand why, and maybe Stella can correct me on this, but about why I can't recognize that. I would say over our break here, there was a beautiful short film by the New York Times. I can't remember the name, but it was actually about the data labelers in Kenya on behalf of the AV companies. And so it showed them picking out discreetly all these sort of objects. You'd think that'd be pretty easy to data label a school bus stop sign out from there and include that in the rule set. But I'm not an AI engineer, so what do I know?
Yeah. And there is sort of, I think, also a regulatory question right now. So the CPUC here in California is trying to write the regulations about teleoperations, which again gets to the first story. It's kind of a Wild West right now. Like the teleoperator doesn't need to be in the same state, doesn't need to pass like a background check or even necessarily have a driver's license. They could theoretically be drunk because they're not, quote unquote, driving a car. So might be time for some rules. I don't know. But
yeah, it's kind of the same here right now as London prepares for robotaxi trials. It's questions around teleoperations. We're not quite sure what's happening either. There's not been much guidance published on it. Obviously, everything that's been going on in the US, it's kind of things that we're looking to as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a little bit more of a visibility into that. And then we have to talk a little bit Tesla, of course. Can't talk AVs without talking Tesla. So they have, said that they removed the safety monitors from their robotaxis in Austin, but then some sleuth saw that no, they're actually just trailing in the car behind.
Very well played. Very well played.
Which is like, that's how every Tesla story is like, oh, we did the thing. And then 5 seconds later, it's like, oh, but actually.
Well, Jonah, if you've got better ideas to juice the stock by 4% and like on a single headline.
Humanoids, robots, Mars, servers in space.
Have to be a more subtle way.
Yeah. How much wealth is at least temporarily created by that because they cut that out there? But
well, did Alex Roy juice the stock when he said that he had successfully driven from LA to New York without any disengagements on whatever they're calling FSD these days?
Good question. I would have to go back and trace that down about whether there's the Alex Roy effect on there too. But that to me, the announcement here, this news story here, this exclusive that they managed to do the run. I mean that connects directly back here with these whole arguments that are being made here that AVs, we have to adopt them because they're safe. There was a New York Times op-ed on this maximalist argument that for the good of humanity and the 40,000 deaths a year in the United States alone, we've got to adopt AVs. And we'll get to the UK actually be like, oh really? We have other strategies as well, because David Zipper and others have pushed back on this, being like, if that's your top concern, well, we've got all these other tools in the kit here that we've not yet deployed. And then the counter version of this is like, yeah, the Alex Roys of the world, like, well, let's go do a cross-country drive without telling anybody we're in or effectively doing that. And then second is like, Mad Max mode by Tesla here, where, how do you guarantee a world of safer than human drivers if the human passengers are allowed to choose insane modes out of it too? Both of these things poke holes in that whole rationale here that, that
I
AVs
would simply
must be
say
impaired.
that you should not be allowed to have a product on the road called Mad Max mode. That's for going full dictatorship, let's make that one of the dictats.
Red flags in front of regulators, but they just unlike the bulls, they don't charge. I don't get it, but
well, that's our fine and fair country.
But I was to say, who does
going on with the roads over in the
who's
UK?
Rational and safe on this call here? Let's hear about it from another far off land that's actually doing this right.
Well, yeah, it's as you're saying, it's all part of a wider package with, it shouldn't just be AVs, but we have a new road safety strategy that the government has announced. It's the first one in a decade, so it's very big news for the UK. And it has honestly so much of the transport realm, from micromobility, AVs, driving itself. So some of the key things, firstly, for drivers, it means things like lower alcohol limits, longer driving test periods, mandatory eyesights, which are really like material changes that we'll start to see. They want to mandate new vehicle technologies like ADAS into cars. I think that's under a law called Dev's Law, which is going to mandate 18 vehicle technologies, which is very good. Micromobility, it's been a little bit vague still. It's still under this.
I feel like micromobility has been vague for like a decade in the UK.
It's been literally a decade. So it's still when parliamentary time allows, when parliamentary time permits. So we're still waiting to see what will happen. But they've reiterated their plans that they do want to legislate on it.
Why does your island hate scooters so much? What happened?
I can't tell you. No idea, but let's see what happens. But I think that we're expecting some regulation this year. And then, AVs again, government reiterating its plan to fast track the robotaxi trials, which are starting this spring. So we already have Waymos on the roads and starting to see that take effect.
The robotaxi trials, it makes it sound so much more like Hunger Gamesy.
I would say begun the robotaxi wars have in London.
And you've got, obviously, you got the homegrown hero, you got Wave, right? A Wave with an extra Y. Do you see them around? Like, is it like, do you know what a Wave looks like? Are they conspicuous?
Yeah, they are. They have their own look. You'll be able to recognize one. I don't know if Waves are on the ground at the moment. I think they are. Waymos definitely are. People are seeing those around. But we have created this kind of explainer ahead of the robotaxi trials just to explain what companies are coming, what boroughs have already said they're taking part, going into the conversation as you were talking about teleoperations, what we know so far. A lot of the information is unknown at the moment. There's more questions than answers, but we're kind of just
That's true both sides of the Atlantic.
Yeah, just following it closely and see how it goes.
Well, speaking of cars, this one just kind of tickled me. It's a fun story, but TrueCar was taken private by its founder, Scott Painter, $227 million take-private deal with a bunch of, kind of a hodgepodge of insurance money and dealer tech money and sort of all these people that I think will become owners and also partners with the reconstituted version of TrueCar. But this one I just kind of find interesting. So Scott Painter previously founded Cars Direct, TrueCar, Fair.com, Autonomy. Basically, like, this guy just so set on making it so that you could be able to purchase a car directly on the internet, which, respect that. If I can get toothpaste that way, why can't I get a Mazda? But it's always been like a up and down, windy road. TrueCar is worth about 1/10 of what it was at its peak. So, I mean, respect to the man that keeps getting money to keep trying this idea. I don't know. Dealers oppose it, and there's lots of, state laws that basically protect dealers and make it tricky. And then consumers are always a little, skittish about spending $50K online. But the one thing that I actually was tickled by is that TrueCar was originally incorporated under the name Zag.com. So maybe they'll sell that one to you guys.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder what their thinking was there.
Well, always, you got to zag when others zig. It's the same sort of thinking, I'm sure. That's what he was trying to do.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, what else? What's going on in Asia, Greg?
Well, I'm endlessly fascinated by so-called quick commerce and where it's actually happening. So while, ZERP wasn't too kind, the end of ZERP wasn't too kind to many of the companies here, it's booming, of course, in the Gulf and in China and India. And yeah, I've read some really interesting analysis of this about in China, where you've got WeChat and Meituan and those other big platforms. Delivery is really like sort of an arm. It's a loss leader, of course, to pull them into the broader platform. And so China's put out, coming down from whatever the party, whichever arm of the party has said, that they have made it clear that they would like the platforms to curb the price wars here. They're race to the bottom of this because, again, it's about customer acquisition retention. So they're undercutting it there. And, and listeners are probably familiar with the fact that, China has a sort of larger strategy, I don't know, called involution, where, and we're seeing this with EVs. This is basically the same market in EVs. Build tons of capacity, have ruinous price wars at home domestically, and then eventually export, which you can do with epic range mile EVs. You can't really do that with warmed over food. So apparently they would like them to tamp down on this, and that's what governments can do, I suppose, in China and maybe now the U.S. to basically retain some of those profits and not gouge each other there, gouge the customer instead.
Yeah,
well, so they've got that.
Yeah, we'll see if they can do it. I mean, they've been saying these orders for a while now of like enough price wars, but.
Exactly. And it just keeps going
get all
on
these
and on and on.
Funny stories about, this local province is so deeply in debt they're not paying the workers, but they're still spending money on subsidies for their EV factory.
Incentives matter. It all turns on like what the local incentives are, and those things. And then India's got the interesting one too. So India, of course, their government is now demanding an end of mandatory 10-minute delivery because, they're basically working the gig workers to death on the mandatory 10-minute delivery. So there it's, Blinkit was the first one to go, and there's pressure on all the other sort of competitors, Zomato and others. To just drop that as a mandatory promise here in the name of driver safety and health. So, who knew you could make it too fast, but they found the limit.
All these things, I'll believe it when I see it. There's lots of, I think, good intentions from the government, but I feel like we've been hearing them sort of telegraph these signals for a while, and the market wants what it wants, and the market wants really fast toothpaste. Well, okay, back to this one's a stateside story, so but first covered on Zag, but I found it particularly interesting because it has so many brands that we like. It's sort of a Marvel superhero of amazing mobility brands. So in New York City, the Micromobility Coalition launched to steer policy under the new Mamdani administration, trying to basically undo the dead weight of the last 4 years of Adams basically slow walking all sorts of road and bicycle safety reforms. So who's on this one? We got the e-mobility project, you got Upway, you got Infinite Machine, you got People for Bikes, Pop Wheels, Whiz, Ride Panda, Bloom, DutchX, Propel Bikes, and then I always struggle with Shabaz's company, Oni. Greg, help me.
I don't know. I've heard Shabazz pronounce it completely differently once, and I cannot remember what it was, though. So it's still Uni to me until I'm finally corrected.
And Sela, what were some of the goals of this new superhero gang.
So they've set out some key recommendations, for example, 500 secure bike parking locations across the state, which I think was already agreed under the partnership with Transit Go a few months ago, if that was the same commitment.
It
And
feels
then,
like there's a lot of like reiterating of
yeah,
existing concepts.
yeah. And then they've said 50 miles of new protected bike lanes, which will increase to 100 annually, accelerated deployment of safe charging infrastructure. So, yeah, you guys will know more than me, but from my perspective, I feel like I'm always hearing people say they need some kind of industry coalition like this in New York City. So, I mean, it feels like a win if you feel it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are all like good policy goals that the city has sort of said it will do and then sort of
Yeah.
fails to do. And it's nice, obviously New York has a bunch of startups working in this space, so there's some self-interest, but I think it's self-interest for the public good. And Mamdani's already kind of getting to work. I saw that he personally got that big hump that everyone that's biked on the Williamsburg Bridge knows about smoothed over with a load of asphalt. So he's working for the people.
I would say it is interesting. It'll be interesting to see how the Mamdani administration telegraphs its commitment to these things, because they've taken a page from two presidents actually. One, the new Office of Mass Engagement that Mamdani's created, borrowing from his campaign volunteer force. So it'll be very interesting to see how they can transform civic engagement, which of course is often the bane of doing these kinds of transformative projects because local resistance happens. So if they can figure out a way to transform that process, it'll be huge. And then, of course, the other one that comes out is real NYC curb heads know that, Shabazz Stewart felt particularly blindsided by the Eric Adams DOT in the waning days here of pushing through this, Beyond Pilot project here that was given to our friend Gino at Transito. And so it'll be interesting to see how transparent the Mamdani administration is under new DOT Commissioner Mike Flynn, who, I understand is a Bloomberg veteran, was over working with the Sam Schwartz folks, and I've seen nothing but praise for Mike. So very curious to see how he can advance this as well. So good start.
Yes. And I feel like that's also to me a good sort of, like, lots of people excited about how transformative this administration might be, but you're getting a lot of Bloomberg folks and a lot of de Blasio folks. And like, frankly, I think that's fine. Like, we're not going to get a sea change. We're going to get, competent bureaucrats.
And people have pointed out, in addition to congestion pricing being originally a Bloomberg era proposal, the fast free buses on the bus lanes, that's also Bloomberg era. Like, Mamdani's taken a lot of stuff that the Bloomberg folks.
Get you a rich technocrat.
Well, the rich technocrats pitched it from a market standpoint, and Zoran's taking it from a different messaging standpoint, but in many cases, it's still the same.
Yeah. But it's all good, because then across the Hudson, ever locked in struggle, New Jersey is now requiring that people on e-bikes get a license, which, like, on one hand, I don't want a kid on like a 60 mile per hour motorcycle that's pretending to be an e-bike, but it's kind of, I don't know, like, you should be able to get on a bike and be a safe operator without needing to jump through a bunch of hoops. So I'm a little torn on this one. I don't know. Greg, you've got kids that are bike age. What do you think?
Yeah, well, again, this gets back to me. Yeah, like this reminds me of the debates we were having, like the micromobility equivalent of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin is like, how big or how fast is it before it's no longer micromobility? And so is this the kind of thing where, like, if it's going 40 miles an hour and achieves a sufficient, kinetic energy that it's dangerous to people, then sure, then possibly. But I think it's crazy here in Montreal, for example, that, like, I'll get ticketed if I use one of the e-bikes from Bixby, but I'm not wearing a helmet because it has an electric motor in it. That strikes me as a real unforced fail. It's not effectively like a motorcycle. That's an electric bike. So I don't know, but where do we draw those lines? Where did New Jersey draw these lines? I'd have to go delve into the policy to see what.
I couldn't say how many watts. You do have to do 6 points of ID, written vision test.
Yeah.
Need a permit first.
Is it a speed thing? Is it a watts thing? Is it a weight thing? Like, you can figure out these variables about, like, where does it get dangerous, in terms of the mass.
I have to imagine the UK, where you need a permit to watch television. You must probably need a bike permit too, yes?
You don't need a permit to watch television.
you gotta pay for your BBC license, yes?
Yeah. Wait, how is it with us riding e-bikes? Yeah, there's nothing like this, no regulation like this in insurance. We have the same issue with, like fat bikes that are increasing in size, taking up the bike lanes. This is becoming an increasing discussion. But this in New Jersey, it sounds very lengthy, and it sounds very difficult now, I think.
New Jersey out-regulating old Jersey. You heard it here first, folks.
There you go. Well, again, new admin will be curious to see how Governor Sherrill makes out with this. And then, of course, feuding with Governor Hochul across the river about the Port Authority. So it's good to see New York and New Jersey up to their old tricks here.
Yep. Well, on that note, let's talk to Seth Cohen, co-founder of Sweetfin, about the art of delivery. And we're back. Today I'm joined by Seth Cohen, co-founder of Sweetfin. Hey, Seth.
How are you, Jonah? Good to see you.
It's great to see you, Seth. This is an exciting one to kind of kick off this next season of the show because it's always fun talking about how delivery impacts the real world. So we're going to get a big conversation about what it's like from a restaurant operator's. But before we get into that, let's just get the Seth story. Let's get the Sweetfin story. For those that don't know it, what is Sweetfin?
Sure. Well, Jonah, thanks again for having me. I'm Seth. I'm co-founder of Sweetfin. Sweetfin was started in 2015, so a little bit over 10 years ago. And it was born out of my passion for food and hospitality. And I graduated USC. I wanted to create a business in the food world that hopefully could be scalable. And when I was sort of looking at the food landscape, it became very clear and evident that fast casual was the way to go. A lot of concepts like Chipotle and Sweetgreen and Shake Shack were starting to really find their stride in the market. And consumers at the time, and I believe they still do, wanted to enjoy food that had a higher quality at a price point that was reasonable and approachable. So fast casual was the niche or the category in food that I thought would be the best way to attack potential creation of a scalable concept. And so we started thinking about what categories had been untapped. And a lot of the fast casual restaurants really doing the same thing. It was pizzas, burgers, there were some salads, but primarily it was food that was unhealthy. And, just the way that I grew up and the way that I like to eat, I always cared about what I put in my body. And I wanted to create a concept that was healthy, but also delicious and something that was craveable. And growing up in LA, sushi was a huge part of, I guess, like a kid or high schooler's diet. I just read an article yesterday, funny enough, in the Wall Street Journal that said $50 dinners are making parents broke because kids are enjoying sushi so much. So we were a little bit ahead of the trend there. But we sort of discovered this type of food that I had eaten growing up from time to time, especially when I would go on family vacations to Hawaii, called poke. And I thought, wow, this is an incredible way to eat raw fish. It took all of the familiar flavors of sushi and you put it in an easy to eat bowl. And so you could customize it and really sort of hit all of the check boxes that I wanted to, grow in the fast casual market. So it was customizable, it was healthy, it was great for to go and delivery.
And less labor intensive than making actual maki.
Exactly. And it was just delicious. We opened up shop in Santa Monica in 2015. Truly one of the first, if not the first, customizable build your own poke concept in the country. And since then, the category has absolutely exploded. I think within 24 months of us opening in LA, there were over 300 different independently owned poke shops in the LA County region. And that just, California, at least back in 2015, was really the trendsetter for culinary in the fast casual world. So it blew up all over the country from Wisconsin to as far east as New York. And then globally, we had people coming in from Switzerland and Brazil and Italy saying that they wanted to open up a poke shop. And so over 10 years, we've been slowly but surely growing the concept. We have 15 locations, all company owned in Southern California, mostly in LA, also in Orange County and San Diego. And, we feel like we were the pioneers in the category and we feel like we're still the pioneers in the category. We're continuing to innovate and we're excited about the next 10 years of Sweetfin.
Yeah, poke really took over the world. I'm a little curious what the fish is like in Wisconsin. I guess you could do with some lake trout or something, but
yeah, it's probably not great.
So you had such a methodical approach to that, thinking about it, not just from the culinary standpoint, but from the sort of market standpoint. What's your background as an entrepreneur? Like what got your mind sort of thinking this way?
Yeah. So again, my original passion was food. I don't know why I loved to cook growing up. I was also a very early adopter in watching the Food Network, probably before it was socially acceptable for high school kids to watch Emeril Lagasse and Bobby Flay on the Food Network. But I love food. I grew up in a family. My father is an entrepreneur. He owns a small business, but he's been in the mortgage banking world his whole life. So I had a deep understanding for real estate and finance and a true passion also for marketing. I love branding. It's something that I just enjoy doing. And so I was, after graduating USC, I had a lot of small little entrepreneurial endeavors in college, but I was really trying to triangulate sort of what I was good at and my passions. And so that was marketing, it was food, and it was real estate. And again, trying to be methodical about what I wanted to do after college, I immediately came to this idea of I need to be in the food world and I need to create something that can scale, and I will have not an unfair advantage, so to speak, but really, I think a helpful advantage in being able to understand the two sides of the business, which is, food and operations, but also, three sides really: food and operations, marketing and branding. But I think the most important part about running a successful business in the hospitality space is knowing your numbers. And so having a bit of a finance background and then having a background in real estate was really helpful.
One thing you've been talking a lot about on social recently, for anyone that's following you, and you got a great LinkedIn game, I'll give you credit for that, but you've been teasing this sort of next chapter for Sweetfin. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, would love to. And it's something that we launched this week, and I'm really, really excited about it. Sweetfin as a brand and a company has always been at the forefront of the category of poke. And we've always, I guess our tagline as a company from day one was keep it fresh. And so I think that's important for any business. You have to continue to remain relevant, evolve, innovate. And so at 10 years, 10 years is a really important milestone. And we had the ability to really sort of stop, take a breather about a year ago, not open new stores and think about what does a Sweetfin look like 10 years later in 2025, 2026. And we did a lot of market research, spoke to a lot of our guests, and our guests said the same thing. They love the core values of Sweetfin. They love our culinary approach, the fact that we're chef driven. They love that we're 100% gluten free, and they love our flavors. But we needed to increase guest frequency. So people love the flavors of Sweetfin, but they didn't always want to eat raw. And we thought there was an opportunity for us to really look at our menu, keep poke as a core competency, but expand the menu in an intelligent way that fit within our brand. So what we did is really exciting. We partnered with a 2 Michelin star chef named Daniel Patterson. He's someone that is unbelievably
great chef.
He's a great chef. Anyone from the Bay Area who went to his Restaurateur in San Francisco, Daniel's won a James Beard Award for Best Chef. He was Food and Wine Best Chef. So be able to acquire sort of a culinary talent to work alongside us to develop this new side of the menu, which is essentially warm bowls and salads and seasonal vegetable sides, is an incredible opportunity. But what was really important to us was that we weren't trying to inorganically just expand the menu. We really wanted to focus on our guests, what they wanted, and took, I would say, the flavors of Sweetfin. So a lot of California produce with Asian influence and Japanese influence, and created this whole new side of the menu. So a lot of the same familiar flavors from yuzu to miso and soy and chili are woven through this new category, these new categories of our menu. And really, the goal is to do two things. It's to increase the guest frequency, to get people to want to eat Sweetfin more often who are already our Sweetfin users, but more importantly, to increase our total addressable market, because we do feel like Sweetfin is a brand that can live really in most cities in the US. That was always the goal. How can we create something that was scalable nationwide? And now we feel like we have this all-encompassing menu that integrates poke with a warm side as well. And so it's very differentiated, and it's a menu that I can't stop eating. I've been eating it for weeks and haven't got sick of it. Our employees can't stop eating it. And I've been spending a lot of time in what we're calling our first innovation kitchen at West 3rd. And guests it's amazing. We've had many guests come in 3-4 days in a row since first launching, trying new things because they love it. So it's really exciting. It's a concept that we're going to roll out to our other locations, and ultimately it will be our growth vehicle to go hopefully nationwide, and will be the basis of our menu moving forward.
I'll have to stop by and try it. Sounds delicious.
You have to. It's honestly incredible.
So I want to dive into delivery. We could talk about food all day long, and I would love to, but this podcast, we got listeners that are delivery. And so we talk a lot about, the vehicles and the platforms and the policies, but, I want to talk about it from the restaurant operator's perspectives. What is it like, making delivery work for your business? So starting with a high level, how important is delivery as a service layer to a restaurant like yours, whether it's Sweetfin specific or just fast casuals as a category?
I mean, it's unfortunately unbelievably important. I have I'll be as candid as I can and as transparent as I can, but I have a love-hate relationship with delivery. Years ago when we started Sweetfin, delivery didn't exist, and I've seen every sort of iteration and evolution of the product. Our first sort of touch point with delivery, there's two funny things. Number one, Postmates drivers used to come in with a prepaid debit card. They used to stand in line and they would order food. And then the next iteration was Uber Eats. They would buy 50 of our poke bowls, bring them to a centralized delivery sort of hub, and then they would distribute the bowls sort of probably 4 or 5 hours later.
Warming up as they go. Yeah, great.
Yeah. But delivery is really important. I'm sure you've talked about this on your podcast a million times, but the delivery companies have done a really, really good job of acquiring customers. They do a good job of acquiring customers. They've done a really good job of building apps that are sticky. They build apps that have really low friction, and the apps are getting smarter. So they're serving content to you that's customizable, that makes you want to go use the app more frequently. And so that's a really hard sort of or environment to be competitive against them. And so you have third party and you have first party delivery. And
are you guys on all the third party apps?
No, we're not. We have an exclusive relationship with Postmates and Uber. That's a whole nother conversation about what's right for your brand. And I think we can talk about that. It depends on the geographical area that you're in. But really, COVID was I look at two sort of things happening at once. That was the accelerant. So you have COVID, obviously people being at home ordering food was accelerant number one. And then you had this sort of zero interest rate environment that we were in, where you essentially had free money, you being the third party companies, DoorDash, Uber, and Postmates and the others, to go out and acquire customers. And they were very smart about the way they acquired customers. It was through deals that they were funding, and they got customers to start making this habitual sort of usage of their app. And so now anytime someone thinks about ordering food or I'm hungry, the idea is that they jump to the marketplace of their choice. And that's something that didn't exist, 5 years ago, but it's growing. And
you can kind of look for a deal for, I want this category of food. And as long as it delivers to me, I don't really care who it's by. What about, so you mentioned you got a third party exclusivity. There's obviously a Sweetfin app too. And I imagine you use like, an Uber direct sort of service to handle the deliveries there.
Yeah.
How much did the economics change in a rough sense for an order coming from a 3PD versus one coming from an in-house channel?
So in-house, the way we run our business and everyone is different. We do not subsidize delivery for our guests. So $1 in or $1 spent is essentially $1 in minus credit card processing. We love those orders. Third-party platforms, I'll say this, it used to be very clear. The economics used to be very clear, even a couple years ago. You had your commission rate, and then you had your pricing on the app. And the delta was essentially the cost to play. What's happened over the last couple of years, which in my opinion is a bit unfortunate, but smart from a third party standpoint, is they've recognized their ability to create this sort of competitive ecosystem where restaurants are essentially bidding for digital real estate, because they know that if you have great placement, there's a much higher likelihood that someone's going to order from you. And so you have these different costs that are now sort of eating away at your bottom line. It's not just the commission, it's the commission, and then it's the ads. Because if you don't have ads, you're not seen. And then there's a third component. Yeah. And then there's a third component, which makes the whole situation even a little bit more convoluted, which is promotions. Third-party companies have, once again, been very smart in creating an environment where they are essentially forcing all merchants, whether you have a great brand or not so great brand, to promote on the app frequently. And the reason why they do that is because they want to create pricing parity between the third-party apps and the first-party apps. They don't want you to be able to market to your customers and say something like, if you order direct, it's 30% cheaper. They force you essentially to run promotions that take 30% off the price. So you truly have pricing parity between first and third party, again, making it even more challenging to compete against them. And they utilize their account management or account managers to really share this narrative about, you guys have to promote because your competitors are promoting, everyone's running sort of different promotions, buy one, get one, spend 30, get 7 off, etc. And
Sure.
so if you are not promoting on the apps, you're no longer competitive. And so,
and then you're training the consumers to expect a deal too.
100%. And so they're acquiring your customers. And so to go back to your question that you asked, they're acquiring your customers. $1 in or $1 spent by a customer is now maybe, it really depends how you manage it. It could be 70 cents. It could be 80 cents. It could be 60 cents, depending on the type of promotion or how savvy you are on ads. But it creates an environment for operators, unless you're very sophisticated or are able to use tools like companies like Loop that itemize your costs with marketing and whatnot. It's unclear truly what the cost of doing business on the app is. And if the third parties are constantly acquiring your customers, and it's no longer this game of incremental revenue, it's just revenue, then a business that's challenging, being hospitality in general with margins, becomes even more challenging when a large percentage of your P&L is not getting 100% of the revenue. So it's a very precarious time in this sort of third-party delivery world right now.
Yeah, they don't make it easy. You've been a notable booster, I would say, of delivery technologies like the Coco robotics sidewalk bots. How do you think about those? How does that improve the economics for a restaurant? How does that change the experience for a worker in the restaurant? Change the experience for a person receiving the order? Let's talk through the whole cycle.
Sure. As you said, we were early adopters with Coco. We've been working with them for 3 years, and I've personally been working sort of with their team to help them understand the needs and wants from a restaurateur from an operations standpoint. I think ultimately where the technology is going, it's going to be extremely positive for restaurateurs. Being able to efficiently deliver food at a lower cost is really the unlock to not being as reliant on the third-party delivery services. And so if we can, utilize a technology that allows us to deliver food faster and cheaper, and ultimately we have better margins and the consumer is happy, and from an environmental standpoint as well, there's less cars on the road, there's less drivers coming into our restaurants. That's a business that's truly a win-win-win for everyone. And so that's how we thought about it from the beginning. Obviously, there are still limitations with robots, where they can go, how far they can go, how quickly they can go. But for us, it's a great sort of, or for any restaurant where temperature is important, it's a great opportunity for us to get our food out as quickly as possible. We finish bagging, we staple the bag, food's in the robot within 60 seconds, and it's on its way. There have been many times where I've spent, a lot of hours in our restaurant sort of observing our third-party delivery timing. And sometimes it takes 30, 40, almost an hour for our normal Uber orders to get picked up. Why is that happening? Well, for one, Uber is trying to squeeze, they're really trying to be as efficient as possible. So you have multiple deliveries happening with one driver at once. So they may be picking up from Sweetgreen, then they may be going to Tender Greens, and then they're going to Sweetfin, and they're trying to create a super efficient route. Well, that's great for Uber. That's not great for us as the restaurant, and it's not great for the customer. The customer's not having a good experience. The product isn't turning out great. So ultimately, we may have to refund them, or the guest doesn't want to order again. So being able to take our food, really, I would say, own and control more of the experience compared to working with a driver is what we love about the, I would call them sidewalk robots or whatever the terminology that people are using these days.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And also, conversely, sometimes you have drivers hanging out waiting for an order, and then you kind of have this weird cluster of traffic in front of the restaurant. So the bots are just more space efficient.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, last question for you, Seth. If you could come up with one single message that you'd want, the delivery, third-party companies, and city regulators, policymakers to understand when they think about restaurants and delivery, just to make your life easier as an operator, what would that be?
I think from the third-party standpoint, again, as I explained or tried to explain it, it's a very precarious time. because ultimately the restaurants are the customer. It's not the end user. Without the restaurant, there is no ecosystem. There's nothing to deliver. And so the amount of pressure that's being put on restaurants by the third parties, and it may not, I don't think it's necessarily nefarious or ill-intentioned. It's just the reality. They may not understand the business, but it's a very tight P&L that restaurateurs run, especially in certain markets. The costs of doing business are not dissipating. The cost of insurance is increasing. The cost of labor is increasing. The cost of rent is increasing. And food costs, as everyone knows, are increasing. There is just inflation. And so when you layer on this additional cost of doing business, basically a gatekeeper for your revenue, it almost makes it not possible to run the business. And for anyone intelligent, it really disincentivizes entrepreneurship of starting a business because the risk reward is no longer there. There's a misalignment. And so I don't know if it's capping fees. I don't know if it is, implementing more sort of robotics in the delivery system in order to bring the cost down. So it's a profitable delivery for the third party and it's a profitable sort of order for us as restaurants. But something needs to be done. I unfortunately don't have the answer other than, we have to cap fees. I would say, I know this isn't technically about mobility, what I'm about to say, but the advertising piece is a really, challenging part of the business. But figuring out creative solutions to bring down the costs of delivery for the restaurant, I think will create a healthier ecosystem and ultimately will be great for the third parties and the customer.
Yeah. The status quo just doesn't quite work. Plenty to think about and plenty to chew over, and hopefully chew it over with some tasty poke. Seth, thank you so much. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Jonah.